Up, guys? David DeCelle here, your host of Business with the Boyz, and I'm joined here today with my co-host Landon Troyer. Landon, what's going on, dude?
Oh, nothing much. Just a balmy, cold Nebraska day here.
Dude, your spot is mad fun in the summers, but I don't know how you stay sane in the winters. You're gonna need to get a Florida place.
Yeah, I think that's in the cards eventually for sure. Staring out over this ice-covered lake is a little daunting.
You ever go out there and ice fish or anything, or do you just stay away during this time of year?
No, I stay indoors as much as possible. Fishing is way too damn slow for me. I got a ton of buddies that love to do it. I'm like, come on out anytime you want, but not my jam.
Well, I know growing up, I used to go out with my uncles in a lake in Massachusetts, and they had this like hut, I guess you would call it, that was on skis. So they'd go out there, drill the holes, go and the hut had no bottom to it and put it right over the hole. And it was enough for a few people to sit in there, make a little fire and just chill and drink and bullshit and, wait for the flag to pop up. But I agree.
Yeah, which
Fishing's not my thing.
fire while you're sitting on the ice always sounds like a great idea to me, right? My
I,
brother-in-law's lives for this shit, and I'm like, no, I want nothing to do with being cold and miserable and sitting in a hut on the ice with a fire burning next to me.
Yeah, it doesn't make a ton of sense, but it also we never fell through, so knock on wood. But as our friendly disclaimer, don't try this at home. Well, I don't know about you, man, but we've released 2 episodes so far. We've had Dan Allison, we've had Peter Mayberry, and just the support that we've received and all the folks coming out through the woodworks has been really cool to see. There's, folks that are one or two, three, 1, 2, 3 people removed that have been touching base being like, hey, listen to the show. So for everyone listening, really appreciate the support, appreciate the sharing. Last I looked, we had like 8 or 9 reviews on Spotify already. So that's just been super cool to see.
Yeah, thanks everybody for just that. And I've thought it's been really cool just to have people that have texted me or reached out with like actual feedback that they've taken away from the show. It's good to know it's actually impacting people and what they're kind of doing and how they see the world. So yeah, it's been a pretty fun ride.
Yeah, and I would emphasize that, we appreciate the, kind words and support, of course, but as you have feedback, right, we want you to be a part of this journey as well. So hopefully what you'll come to see is over time, the content that we're putting out in addition to the podcast, on YouTube and social media, we'll continue to, elevate that over time. But any feedback that you have, by all means, feel free to share that.
And I would also say any individuals, that have awesome stories, we'd love to meet anybody that you guys are interested or think has some good content to put out there.
100%. Yeah, I know after the first couple episodes, there's been, a bunch of folks reach out to you. Hey, I think so-and-so would be a good guest. Same on my end. So keep that coming. That way we can continue to push out, an episode a week. But for today's episode, we had Matt Taylor on, and Matt really well. He's a bar owner in Nebraska. He's in real estate. He was an early adopter in crypto. He's got a son who he says is going to take over the world, which is always cool to hear. And it's exciting to see when entrepreneurial folks build a family and instill those values. But this was a really good episode. I personally enjoyed it a lot. I think Matt's a great dude, but what were some of your takeaways from the show?
Yeah, I mean, just that. I mean, knowing Matt, I mean, he and I go back to college, and there's so many similarities in our backgrounds, right? Both from small town Western Nebraska. He lost a mom to cancer. I lost a dad to cancer. Both very. When I think of the true entrepreneur, somebody who eats, sleeps, and breathes it, it's Matt Taylor. I mean, he's the culmination of just that, right? And he's just as great of a businessman as he is, he's an even better human. And when you talk generationally, I have zero doubt that Trey, his son, will do just that because, I mean, as we talk a little bit in the episode, Matt's dad is kind of instilled in those values in him. And ultimately now, which is really cool because I've gotten pretty close with Larry too, when he comes back to town from Arizona, they're business partners together, and to watch those two together and how they view the world and what their strategic moves are as far as business goes is pretty awesome.
Yeah. I also enjoyed hearing too, one would think, and you've probably seen and experienced other folks, where you live, where the owner of a bar is there and having some drinks every night with the customers, but he doesn't. He runs it like a true business. He doesn't get sucked in and limit his profits because he's drinking them.
Yeah, you won't even see him when at the hours of his peak hours, right? I mean, he is in there during the day running his business. I mean, we're talking, I can say this because obviously working with him on the financial side of things, this dude's got a 401k plan for his employees. I mean, I don't know how many bars out there have a true 401k plan for their employees that, they're matching contributions, et cetera. But I've got to be pretty, I feel pretty safe saying that it's a relatively small percentage.
Yeah. And it's cool too, I feel like a lot of folks are waiting for, a game changing idea to get into business and the entrepreneurial side of their life. But the reality is your quote unquote boring businesses can be elevated and run like an actual company. You don't need this groundbreaking, tech idea or anything like that. It's, take an existing business and make it better.
Yep. Amen.
So, with that said, let's dive into the episode. Let's hear from Matt. As always, if you share this, if you leave us a review, if you give us some feedback, that's always appreciated. But for now, let's get right into the episode. Who knew I would make it this far? They hated, they never believed me. Yeah, I would never drop the ball. I know I make it look easy. Yeah, Mayweather with the defense. I don't care what a critic got to say. I got them picking up the pieces. Matt, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Phyllis.
Of course. Give us a little background just to help set the stage. So I'm always curious, with people who have had, some success in business. Did you go to college first? Did you not go to college? And what was kind of that first step to getting into the business world? Like, have you ever worked a regular job before entering into this space? Help us kind of understand that journey.
Yeah, I think if we take it back even farther. So my dad was in the Army for 20 years, ran officers clubs in the Army. So kind of bar business is in the family genes. But I was born in Belgium. We moved around as a youngster, Virginia, Albuquerque, New Mexico, whatever. So, being able to adapt to new situations was something that was started from a young age. But my dad had me negotiate for my allowance at a young age. And what does each chore cost? And I graduated from a small high school, Sydney High School, and we lived on a golf course, and we had a big field next to us that people would hit their arid shots into. And so I would go pick up all the golf balls, wash them, and then sell them back to the people on the golf course. That was my first job, and cost of goods was zero. So that was probably my best ever business decision to start. But I went to college. I went to UNL, Nebraska, and I was a finance major, and I was okay at it. I graduated with a 3.5 and change or something. I could navigate the educational system all right. And then I did a financial internship, and I fucking hated it. It was just putting shit into Morningstar, and I do all the hard work. And then, the guy above me pitches to the client, and I didn't like it. And so then a buddy of mine got me a job at working door at a bar, and I loved it instantly. It was instead of me dropping $60-$70 on a Friday night, I'm making $130, and I still got to hang out with people, and I liked the action, and I liked the cash. And, I quickly thought, ooh, maybe this could be a career instead of a job. And so that's kind of where it started.
And what got you from working the door to owning the door? What was that like?
Yeah. Well, when you're
let's unpack that. I mean, that's Matt. I mean, that's an interesting part of your story, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
it is.
I think you and I, obviously knowing each other, working together at the bar, know how that went down. Like, if you're okay unpacking that, I say let's unpack it.
Yeah, it's great. Well, when you're interested in shit, you want to do it, right? And you want to learn more about it, and it becomes a lot easier to do the extra stuff. And so once I liked the job, I just couldn't get enough of it, right? And I wanted to learn every part of the business. And so I quickly advanced, door, bartender, manager, start doing that kind of stuff. Now I'm doing ordering and scheduling. It kind of rose up the ranks quickly. And I was lucky to learn under Neil Grummert, was the owner of that bar. And a lot of people in the bar.
Badass dude, by the
way. A lot of people in the bar world treat it like a party, and he treated it like a business. And so I was so lucky to learn under somebody that treated it like a business. And so, rose up through the ranks, kind of running the shop. Neil's opening another shop that I'm going to be a partner in. That was called The Bar. Of course, you can tell. Tavern on the Square, the other room, The Bar are my places I've worked. I'm not great at branding.
Well, keep it simple.
They've all worked out.
Neil is going to open The Bar and Grill. And so I was helping him through that. Dude's going through grad school at the same time. He's 33.
33, yep.
And suddenly passes away. This thing is ruled a suicide. I still to this day do not believe it was a suicide.
I'm with you.
He was found in his garage with the car on and his cell phone in his lap. Before that, throughout the course of a couple months, I found him on the floor of the bar and grill that we were building out, sleeping. I mean, anybody that's been an entrepreneur for long enough knows you burn the candle at both ends all the time. And sometimes your body just shut down. And I think that's what it was. And so that was a crazy, crazy time, right? We were supposed to have a meeting. It was like a 12:30 or 1 o'clock meeting or something. And he's never been late to a meeting. And, 15 minutes go by, 30 minutes go by. I'm like, where the fuck is this dude? Started making some phone calls, and sure enough, they found him in his garage, man. And I interact with the guy every day. I'm not a depressed guy. I know his finances, he was
excited about where things were going,
man. Good spot, man. It's so, I don't know. That was a weird thing. And then threw me into a weird place because I was on the liquor license. He had a couple business partners that he had just broken up his business partnership with. They had 5 bars. And he had spun it off to be like, okay, I get this one, and I'm going to branch out and do other stuff with Matt. You guys can keep those.
And mind you, one of the, I think, separators there, and Matt, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Just, I think one of the reasons that they separated that partnership was because, as Matt said, you had individuals who run a bar like a business, and you have others who run a bar like it's their personal bar. There was a lot of that going on, maybe on the other side of things. And so, yeah.
I never saw Neil drink liquor.
Nope.
I worked for this guy for, 5 years or something, and I never saw him drink liquor. He had a Newcastle. One of his other partners, they had one they called it the Bachelor. It was a pint glass filled with ice, Stoli, and a lemon. So there was no mixer in there. It was just vodka, ice, and a lemon. They called it the Bachelor. I mean, that's the difference between him and his partners, And so, yeah, he's like, I don't want to do this anymore, right? And relationships change, right? And I understand that too. So,
Yep.
But yeah, so that was bonkers then, right? So then I got to run the shop for 2-3 months while the family's sorting out all the affairs, right? He owned a house, and there's a bunch of assets to take care of and all that stuff.
And I will say from all of us, because mind you, I was still working there at the time as well. I think everybody kind of knew where this thing should have gone and who it should have gone to, per se. So it was kind of a foregone conclusion. We thought that, Matt would be taking over. He was kind of already running the show. You thought of the bar, and you thought of Matt Taylor and Neil, and then let's talk about the curveball.
Yeah, so I don't get it, right? So the other side of this is Neil's parents were super religious and have never drank a drop in their whole life. So kind of weird that he went into the bar business. And they didn't know me at all. And they were a little bit older. But so, yeah, I sit down at the meeting to hear that I'm not getting it from his father. He calls me the wrong name 3 times in a row during the meeting.
Oh, man.
And I kind of stormed out, I mean, I was pretty immature 23-year-old at that time. Didn't get it. So then I didn't know what I was going to do. Right. So I got 5 jobs. I was a credit card processor and I was working in another bar in Omaha. And it was just whatever. It was a weird period of my life. But then, I was like, fuck, I think I know what I'm doing here. And I think I understand this industry. Let's go fucking shopping. And so 2 of my best buddies lived in Chicago at that time. So I went to Chicago and looked at every bar for sale. And again, I'm 23. My outfit at that time was an inside out gray t-shirt. And I weighed 140 pounds. So the real estate agent would show up to show me the bar and be like, this is going to be such a waste of my fucking time. But what I did at every bar is I wrote down 3 things I liked. And so I looked at maybe, 20 of them or something. And after that, I have a list of 60 things, what might have been how they arranged their chairs or their bottles or the lighting or the music they're playing or whatever the thing was. And then, kind of come back to Lincoln and hear through the grapevine that there's a coffee shop for sale. I go in and talk to the landlord first and say, hey, would you allow a bar in to this space? Because some landlords are like, hey, we don't want to do anything with liquor. And they were like, yeah. There's a few hurdles, right? That we have a big courtyard. There's a courtyard that seats like 230. And so there's a neighboring Italian restaurant next to us, and they had the liquor license on that. So I had to pay for them to make a new front area, so paid for their front area for, I don't know, seats probably 20 on the front sidewalk for them to delete the liquor license so I could get it. But that was a deal breaker for me. I mean, it's a fire marshal says we seat 49 in here and then 230 outside. Right. So that's really number. Impactful to finances. So, bought out the liquor license essentially, and then remodeled it. It took 2 months, and talk about falling asleep on the floor. I mean, I worked several 26-hour days, right? Start at 9 a.m., finish at 11 a.m. the next day. And I lost weight during this because it was like, I'm living on, chewing tobacco was my meal pretty much, right? Like,
and maybe a Red Bull.
Yeah, there's Red Bull, Jimmy John's sandwich once, and then chewing tobacco to curb the appetite, right? So I lost a shitload of weight during build out, but we did almost all of it ourselves. I mean, some of the finer tuning stuff we hired pros out for, but did it, and we could do it at really cheap, right? When you're broke, you got You're time.
Efficient.
So we'd go up to auctions in Omaha and get, all our equipment at a much cheaper price than buying it new off of Websteron or whatever the fuck. And the whole bill, I put down my entire net worth, which was $5,000 at that time. We borrowed a little bit of money from a bank, and then we got a line of credit that my dad secured with his house. And it makes it real easy to go to work every day if this doesn't work and your dad's got to put he's retired, right? And so shit. Yep. So Pops retained 20% for that, and since then we've bought him a new house. And we paid him back in 4 months of opening. And then since then, he gets a quarterly check every quarter. So
I was going to say, it's worked out well for him.
Best investment he's ever made, for sure.
And he loves it. He's like the mayor when he comes to town, man. It's great. Big LT.
It's been the funnest relationship I've ever done, right? My dad's always been my hero. I always wanted to grow up to be a dad. We talk almost daily. And it's like, how's business? How's my kid now? Then we talk Carolina sports. And then it's like, anything else we got to touch on? Nope, good. See ya.
Yep.
But it's our relationship's gotten so much tighter, and it's good that it worked. I don't suggest doing business with family to anybody that's listening to this. Because if it doesn't work, that fucks up a lot of shit. So, but it did. And like, it's been so fucking amazing for my father and I.
I have some follow-up questions about that journey specifically, but before I go into those, I want to go back to transition quickly from going to college, working in financing, and then working the door of a bar.
Yeah.
The transition from working in finance to, it's perceived as like, oh, you have a good job after college and, you're in a good spot, to then seemingly downgrade to working the door. What was that transition like as it relates to feedback from your peers in your circle of people?
Well, I have a strange group of friends, which I'm sure we'll touch on later.
Well, you're friends with Landon, so that was assumed. But
during this time, it was during the big poker boom. So Chris Moneymaker just won the World Series. And one of my very good friends was way smarter than anybody I've ever fucking met, right? 35 ACT, like, off the charts, like memory, like, I mean, it's outstanding. And a bunch of my friends were into that poker game. And it was the period where there was a bunch of dumb money in the poker. And I would go and work at the bar, and I'd work a 8-hour shift. And I'd come back and I'd be like, I made $140. And Mitch would be like, I just want to sit and go for 13,000. And I was like, I fucking left you here on this futon, went to work, came back, you're still sitting on this futon, and you made 13 grand. Like, and I just made, whatever, like a tenth of that. Like, this sucks. And, but I'm glad I never got into that world. I mean, I peeked into it, right?
You dabbled.
Went on the trips to Vegas. I saw the stuff. I was a sports gambler in college a lot. I don't do much of it anymore, but, yeah, man, I was seeing my peers around me hit this poker boom, and it felt like I was making the wrong decision. But I was good at what I was doing. Again, it rolls back into like there's some sort of intersection between like what you're good at and what you like. And, it's not how much money you make, it's how you make it. Like all these adages are real, and they're adages for a reason, man. I enjoyed what I was doing. I was learning on a daily basis, and I was paying the bills, man. I've always been pretty fiscally responsible. I mean, we didn't talk about this, but I was loaning money to people in high school at 3, 4, 5 points, right? Like I was doing stuff like that, right? Like, so I've always like understood money and always trying to get smarter with it. But to me, it was like, okay, this is actual learnings for me, right? I'm going to college in work, right? I'm learning the system through work.
And I would add too, Matt, I mean, much like myself, I mean, you really don't give a shit, right? You don't need the prestige. You don't need to I know you like to maximize a dollar, right? And it's like, you don't care if people see a bum in the streets because you know what your balance sheet is, at the end of the day. And so I don't think you ever need that validation from anybody else. And that's one of the things I love about you, right? Is like, when I think serial entrepreneur, true entrepreneurial, harder capitalist, literally my mind goes to you.
Well, bro, I know, the score, right? I think the biggest flex is, so we just got back from Napa. Girl drugged me to Napa with 2 other couples, and she hated what I was packing because I was just packing t-shirts. She's like, "You're gonna be underdressed." I'm like, "I'm the fucking richest one on this trip. Yep. I know the score. Like, I don't give a fuck if I know it, right?" So like, oh, look at this clown. He's underdressed. I'm like, yeah. Do they know these are Air Max 97s that are sweet? Like, she's like, "I want you to wear the other white shoes." She's like, "What if you wanted to look cute one day?" I'm like, "No, t-shirts." Nope. And it pissed her off a little bit, but like at the end of the day, man, like you got to be you. Authenticity wins, right? And I think so much of this world right now with Instagram and all is flexing and trying to look richer and cooler than you are. I think the coolest flex is like not looking super rich and like just knowing that you have security and those kinds of things. Like, when I lost all that weight, I started getting into the weight room and like put on some pounds, and it's like, you'll never see a fucking gym selfie of me. Like all these people that want to tag it and say, "Oh, I went to the gym today." It's like, well, fuck CrossFit. I don't know if either one of you guys do it, but I think that's a
Nope.
goddamn.
Listen, Matt, if either one of us did CrossFit, you would already know.
Yeah,
that's
you
the
guys
number
would have
one rule
told
of
me that would have
CrossFit.
opened the conversation. You guys know the wrong way to do a pull-up? We'll teach you. Like it's I mean, I think it like the coolest thing is to like hide stuff, and then as people find out layers of you, to be like, oh, there's that too. Oh, there's that too. Like I think yeah. Live in poor. Like I don't live extravagant, Landon. You know, I mean, like it just, man, I have no desire for things. Like I don't know. I have no jewelry. I've never bought a watch in my fucking life. Like college girlfriend bought me a watch. I returned it. Like
you look at dollars.
Did you return it? You return it pre or post breakup?
I had to have the hard conversation with her. I was like, bitch, I'm never going to wear this. Like
you also look at dollars like tools though, right? I mean, that's what makes you great. I think it what you do is I don't need that because that money could go here.
Dude, in 7 years, if I'm going to double this, why would I wear this dumbass watch? Like, amen. I'd rather have double the money in 7 years. Like that's the only way. Snickers bar. I'm like, oh, $1.25 now. Like, I don't know. I'd rather have $2.50 in 7 years. Like I just, you know, with everything.
Would you credit your ability to pay your dad back in such a short period of time with opening a new business? Like, how'd you actually fill up the bar? Did you do any marketing? Are you in a great area where there's foot traffic? How did you promote it well enough to get that burden? And I say burden, but it seems like you and your dad have a wonderful relationship. But still, there's a thought in the back of your head of like, shit, I can't fuck this up. I need to make him whole. So what do you credit that to?
Well, because I worked for free, right? The beauty of the bar business is you can make tips, right? So our payroll was zero for the first 2 years. It was a little more than zero. We hired there was a homeless guy out front, and he was already out there. And so during build out, he plugged our meters when we were about to get a parking ticket. He helped us carry in lumber and chairs and all the shit. And again, I was absolutely broke during build out, but we bought him sandwiches a couple of times and sat and ate with him. And we're like, dude, you're out here already. Like, you want a job? So we paid him a little bit, but mostly it's, yeah, man. Tavern just had its 13th birthday. Of those 13 years, I worked for free for 3.5 of them, right? I worked for free during COVID and the first 1.5 years of opening. And so we are in a good spot, right? Timing matters a lot. There's the basketball arena that got built in Lincoln. We signed the paperwork the day after the vote went through, and it took a couple of years to build it or whatever. But also Lincoln's not that big. We're 300,000 or something like that.
That's what I was going to say. I mean,
I had a
personal interjection.
Already,
I was
right?
say it's Matt's reputation. I mean, he had you thought of the bar industry in Lincoln, Nebraska. You knew Matt, right? So the following was pretty loyal there. I mean, myself, when I go to Lincoln, again, I don't drink, but I go to the Tavern just because I want to see Matt, see his crew. They're just they're a step above.
Yeah. And really we want to be, you know, you think of Lincoln as a college town. We didn't want college kids. Right. And so there's still a lot of room for people that are 25 to 45 that are now starting to make their first real money that want to go places that aren't overrun with college kids. Right. So that was a main focus on the front end to be like, hey, we got to keep the knuckleheads out of here. You know, I've worked in the college bar. I don't want to clean up puke or break up fights or all those kinds of things that come with college bars. Like, we want to have adults here. And, you know, from the get-go, I think, you know, the original business plan, all that shit's in there, right? I go back and read it every year on our anniversary and be like, yeah, we accomplished all these goals that we were trying to accomplish. So I think that was a big differentiation, and there was a need for that, right? We saw a need and we met it, right? This is not a crazy new idea that I created, right? We're just serving Bud Light and whiskey shots and like vodka sodas, right? I mean, it's not like I didn't reinvent a wheel here. It was just finding a need that wasn't being fulfilled.
But he also has a 401k plan for his bar. He also has manager salary. I mean, that's the difference, right?
Insurance,
he
phones, cars.
And
Yeah.
he doesn't have that high turnover. I mean, yes, there's some transient employee stuff there, but not for a bar business. I mean, you get long-term commitments and you love to help your people grow. And that's very unique, I think, in your space.
Yeah. Which gives me a small advantage, right? Giving a fuck about your employees, go figure.
Yep.
You mentioned, your father helped out with a loan. You also mentioned that your father taught you how to like negotiate your allowance growing up. What are some of the things that outside of those two things that you learned from your father that you're going to make sure and make an effort to teach to your son?
Yeah. I think, well, so there was a nice dichotomy in my family. Even though my dad was military, my mom wasn't, but she was raised in a Catholic family where they fucking definitely hit their kids, right? So mom spanked me. So, the things that stand out from my dad. So after the Army, he retired after 20 years. He became a human resources manager at a big wire plant with 400 employees or something like that. He's always so majored and just wants to understand what's going on with the person, right? The first thing you think of when somebody's fucking up, it's like, why aren't you doing this for the company? And he has switched my brain to what's going on with them. So I played sports in high school. I don't remember any of the wins. I remember the losses, right? There was a football game. It was a JV football game that nobody cares about. We're up 6 points. They kicked off after scoring a touchdown. There's like 2 minutes left in the game. I returned kicks and I thought I was going to take it to the house, right? And so I, break a couple tackles and I'm going. And then I get stripped from behind, fumble the fucking ball. They score a touchdown, we lose. I think the whole world hates me, right? Like it's a JV football game. Like you don't understand when you're 15, right? And so my dad tells my mom in the car, do not say anything to him, right? I'm a fucking mess. I'm downstairs in my room crying. And my dad comes down and just puts it in perspective, right? Like, hey, this is such a good experience for you, right? Learning about this and feeling this loss. Like, first of all, it's not that big of a deal. Number two, like this is going to make you so much stronger and you know how to secure the ball and like all these like small things that are like, oh, okay. Another one, a basketball game. We set up a play for me. It's like you inbound the ball, they pick the inbounder and you shoot the three. Like I'm walking out of our timeout being like, okay, play set up for me. I got the 3-pointer. And when you throw a dart or hit a golf ball or whatever, you can feel it in your hands like before you're doing it. Like I'm like, oh, I'm going to make this. Like there's 4 seconds left, 3 set up for me. We've practiced this play so many times. I'm ready to go. I turn the ball over on the inbounds pass, right? Like those are the ones that I remember, right? And no, my dad just put shit in perspective for me, man. And like nothing's that big of a deal. We can always overcome it. And what can we learn from it, right? I think that's what I want to teach my kid. And quite honestly, man, like I think of all of my team here as like, how can I help them navigate through these situations, right? Let's put it in perspective. As long as we solve the problem or get smarter, it's still a win. So,
yeah, I think the human element with you and Big LT is, I mean, you can have a conversation with either one, and I always say, I love when people ask you how you're doing and it's not just a question, right? Like they're engaged, like they genuinely give a shit of how you answer this question. Right. Yeah. And that comes through every time your old man's in town. And same thing when I talk to you. I mean, you and I talk fairly regularly, but it's like, I can tell what's supposed to be usually a 2-minute call between you and I, and it turns into 30. And I walk away from that not going, damn, that was a lot of time, but I could have spent another 30. Right. Yeah. And I love that.
Yeah. What I always say is like, what's up to people? And they're like, not much. I'm like, not good enough.
Yep.
Right. Something's up in everybody's life. Right. Like, just be a little engaged in it. And it's crazy what comes out of those conversations. Right. Like there's stuff that happens out of how you doing. They're like nothing much or not good or what, like, and then you're like, give me more, right? Let's talk about it, right? There's just
I think a perfect example is Danny, right? I mean, you talked about his start as, homeless, using his own change to avoid the meter maid for you guys when you're building out. I mean, talk about what that's developed into, not just from him now, but I mean, I know you're still involved with his family now. I mean, let's talk about that a little bit.
I mean, being selfish, man, it changed my life, right? This dude went to jail when he was 17, had a couple bad things that happened in jail that he was there for 18 years. So from 17 to 35, this guy's life during your most impactful years was in jail around no females, around the toughest Detroit prison. I mean, this is scary fucking place.
This wasn't Lincoln, Nebraska prison. This is Detroit.
This is terrifying. I mean, you watch these shows and you're like, Jesus, this is I don't know if I could survive in there kind of thing. Right. Yep. And he comes out of it, his girl had kind of waited for him. She fucking dies of a heart attack in his arms. You understand how these things happen, right? Hearing the stories, a couple bad decisions here and there, obviously black makes a fucking difference. Just, you don't get as many opportunities. I'm totally eyes wide open and aware to that. Geez, man, he had one thing here where he kicked a dude out. Dude kept coming back. He clapped the guy on the forehead. Guy's bleeding from the forehead. We're closed already. He sends 4 friends back in here to go get him. I put Danny inside. I get my butt kicked for, I don't know, 90 seconds or something, but whooped until the police. It was going down. And then he's got to go to court for assault on a guy. I went to every one of his court, and it's I see the frat boy go up there with a DUI, and they're like, okay, see you later, diversion. And then I see him go up there, and if there wasn't me in the room being like, hey, judge, we got to talk more about this. He would have gone to jail. I just see it happening. And I never had seen that before in my life, right? White boy in Nebraska, it's been life-changing to me to see how it goes down. So, but no, he's a great friend of mine still. Now he's got 2 granddaughters and a grandson that he's looking after solo by himself. He's got 2 pit bulls that are super dope. I'm so happy we've grown this friendship, but he's probably given me more than I've given him. And I hate being in a relationship like that ever, where I'm not given 51%.
You don't like the balance sheet on the other direction.
I don't.
but it is cool when you're able to, I would say in that scenario, profoundly impact someone's life, and your reward is having your life impacted as well. To me, I don't even think that's lopsided. I think that's an equal exchange where you're both better off having come across and paid attention to each other.
Yeah. I mean, this is a dude that I called Matt one day, and I was like, what are you doing? He's like, I just got done with Danny. We just went to, I think it was the prison, right? And he went and spoke to inmates there, and Danny kind of told his story of, hey, this isn't it for you guys. That shit's crazy. That's impactful.
Yeah. So we did the prison a couple times, man. So they have a program where inmates are getting out and they want to start businesses. And I took Danny with me, just it's interesting to hear your story. And so we went and spoke to all the the younger ones. I forget what the cutoff was, 20 years old, maybe something like that. But we sit in the first room, right? And I got a button up on. Danny's wearing a fucking dirty black t-shirt. And Danny, his vernacular is a little different than mine. But we sit in the room and I kind of hi, here's what I do. And all of them are rolling their fucking eyes. And then Danny sits down at the table. He's like, okay, let me look around the room. How old are you guys? And the officer comes over and goes, ooh, they can't tell you that. And he goes, okay. He goes, what are you guys in for? He goes, they can't tell you that. And so Danny goes, all right, you're in here because you're selling drugs. You're in here. And the kid shakes his head, yes. You're in here because you got some mental problems. Kid shakes his head, yes. He just goes down the line, and then all of them sit up in their seats And they're like, okay, I'm going to listen to this fucking dude. Right. And, Danny's got some wild stories, right? Like
that would be an
people
understatement.
being thrown off the third balcony and heads exploding like watermelons. Like, like crazy fucking stories to think about seeing. And, man, they listened to him. And it was so cool to watch. We talked to 4 different classes, rooms about 12 to 20 big. But man, like it again, one of these experiences that was like, geez, that was well worth my 4 hours or whatever it was. Like, really, really cool and proud of him. And fuck, he's changing lives too, right? It's the ripple effect of everything ripples out, right? Like I'm not sure everything comes back to you like karma says, but man, I truly do believe that there's a ripple effect in all of life. If you can be nice to the person at checkout, she's nicer to the person that she checks out with next, and like right? Like one at a time.
Pretty cool.
Yeah. When I'm talking with folks, and they're in a bad mood or something's wrong, similar to, what your dad's done for you, which is, hey, reframe your perspective, right? You can choose to look at the negative, or you can choose to look at the positive and productive side of things. So always trying to reframe people's minds, and then always trying, especially like when they're at their worst, it's like, hey, go do like 5 kind things for other people today, and I promise you will feel better. It's it's weirdly so selfish, much power, right? In that.
Yep.
Yeah. It just makes you happier.
What, so we've talked about the bar, but I know you have your hands in other things. So I guess my question is, how long did you...
Let's talk about Other Room a little bit real quick, because that was a cool transition.
Yep.
So Tavern works, right? And pay all the loans back, all that stuff. My grandma was still alive at this time. She was 91 at this time. And my mom wasn't. My mom died when I was 15, which again, I think kind of framed my life and made me stronger, use it as a weapon, all that kind of shit. I had to grow up quicker than my friends, like all this stuff, right? So grandma's like, you need to go to grad school. I was like, all right. So I go and, take all the tests, get accepted back into grad school. I'm going there because I'm like, all right, look at all these business students that I'm going to rub shoulders with, and like, they're all going to be talking about. It was not at all what I thought. I went to maybe whatever, econ 4 million. And like, I go to like 6 classes, and I'm like, fuck all these kids. They're just trying to climb a corporate ladder. And this is definitely not me. So I drop out. I had money set aside to pay for grad school. And then I used all of that to build out the Other Room. And so built that out. It opens in 2013 as really an experiment. I'm a traveler, obviously, with the Army stuff. I like seeing different cities and different stuff. And I go to New York and LA and Chicago, and I see all these like craft cocktail bars. And I'm like, they really selling it for this? Like, I can do the math on the margins, and like, I'm just like, what the fuck? And so yeah, it opened as an experiment.
But hold on, we got to talk about the Other Room. I mean, this is not like your normal bar. Like, this thing is a speakeasy. I remember going in there when you guys were building this thing out. It's like a closet for most people, what they would consider a bar, and it's 400 square feet. It's 400 square feet. Badass. I remember we had the conversation. You were getting shit about you couldn't fit the sink in the bathroom, but then the health department said, you can't have it outside in the it's a.
I won that battle.
Yes, you did. Mic drop.
Yeah, so seats 25 people. It is high end, right? Taverns, it's got dartboards and it's Bud Light and whiskey shots, and it's kind of your everyman, right? Like that's kind of Tavern's vibe. Other Room, on the other hand, is like high society. The cheapest drink's $12. And in Lincoln, Nebraska, I know you guys kind of have a wide swath of listeners, but like in Lincoln, Nebraska, $12 for the minimum is a lot, right? And we roll up into, we did a drink called the Gentleman that was $100. So like, it's spendy, but it's highly crafted. It's only booze. There's no wine, beer. But yeah, in the 14th month of being open, we make a semifinalist for James Beard. So we make top 4 in the nation of craft cocktail programs.
Mind you, the only others on the list are in New York, LA, Chicago, and then Lincoln, Nebraska.
Yeah. I mean, it was like Vegas, New York. I mean, I forget what it was, but it was like, we were the cool. only one that was like, so not being cocky, we're good at what we do over there. Right. And so we quickly went from 5 days a week to 7 days a week. And now we're open 362 days a year, so, but yeah, I mean, that was the next step. And I kind of had to let grandma down and be like, hey, again, authenticity, right, is the thing that fucking matters. And I'm like, grandma, I fucking hated grad school and I had to let her down. But, the thing I always say I speak at college classes sometimes and they're like, well, what do you think if somebody is talking about like your mom or something is saying like, maybe you shouldn't do that? Fuck you. Is what I say. And that's a little aggressive, right? I didn't say fuck you to grandma exactly, but that's the energy I want you to come with, right? Is like, hey, you got to be you, right? At the end of the day, and you got to believe in what you're up to. You got to be authentic to yourself.
When I was transitioning from being an advisor to getting into consulting, it's probably 6-7 months of not making any money, driving for Uber at night to like make ends meet, move back in with my dad and stepmom at like 27 years old after having been out on my own for almost 10 years. And I remember, multiple people in my family, my mom, my dad, some aunts and uncles, friends, would always say, well, why don't you just go and get a job for now so that you have some stability, you have some consistency, and then focus on, what you want to build. And I was so adamant against like, fuck that. It was Uber at night, digging trenches on the weekends, doing anything I could to get by, because I just refuse to have like a typical 9 to 5 type of day. And when you're getting the advice from the 9 to 5 crowd, there's a disconnect. They don't understand. I'm like, I would rather be on the street than clock in and clock out somewhere. So I 100% agree where it's like, hey, I love you, but fuck you. I'm not doing that. And then they look back, and now they look back and they're like, shit, good job. You didn't listen to me.
Yep.
Dude, I was the black sheep of the family, right? Like all my aunts and uncles are doctors and lawyers and all that. And they're like, what are you doing getting in this bar business? Everybody was skeptical until it's like, oh, it worked. Okay.
It's worked out pretty well.
Okay, cool. All right. Like, I don't know. Feels good.
When did you start? So was it finance job, work in the door, bar, and then your other ventures, or how did you start dovetailing into things other than the bar?
Let's talk crypto.
Everything all at once.
Yeah, it was everything, dude. I mean, you got to understand, our friend group in college is the most dynamic, like interesting friend group ever. And they were ahead of the curve on a lot of shit, I'd say. And I'd say that's probably kind of where the crypto play came, wasn't it?
Yeah. So I kind of missed the first boat, actually. So the friend's name I won't mention, but he sat me down in college and was like, hey, I think this Bitcoin thing is like something and we should look at it. And he's like, I'm going to buy 10.
What year was this, Matt? Just for context.
Dude, this was early.
07, 08, somewhere in that world.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So, no, we're talking early.
So he buys $10,000 of Bitcoin when it's $10 a coin. And I tell him to fuck off in the room, kind of thing, right? Like we have a 30-minute combo or something. I'm like, dude, I don't understand it. I don't get it. Like whatever. Luckily I got in later when it was like my first entry point, I think was like 2,400, somewhere in that world. And then have since done some stuff.
A lot of stuff.
I've layered in and moved in and out and whatever, bounced around. But yeah, the first one was like, man, I wish I'd have put some money in then. But yeah, I mean, that's life. I mean, what it's trading at 32,000 today. So $10 to 32,000. He's had a pretty nice return. But yeah, I mean, I think it solves so many problems. I hate banks so desperately. Jess, my partner, when she had her kid, they call it disability when they get their, I don't know, when they're pregnant and they get paid for whatever their time is. And so it wasn't even a big number. It was like 5K or something like that. We were trying to drop into her account. And this is during COVID. And it's like, you can't go into banks. So we're trying to go to ATMs and drop her 5K in. And this ATM doesn't take it. And these banks are closed. And like, meanwhile, I transferred 6 figures on a Sunday and it took 15 minutes through crypto. Like, I mean, it's like, why the fuck? Every week we get change from a bank. We call it in before, and it still takes 45 minutes for us to get $1,000 in ones and 400 and fives and two. I mean, like, they're so inefficient and stupid. I can't wait for them to go out of business. But yeah, I don't know. I don't want to go on banks too much, but JP Morgan's a fuckface.
Well, I was with First Republic, and I still am, but it's now First Republic by JP Morgan because they were one of the banks that went under. I was like, oh shit. But do you like pay, I guess, do you pay much attention to Bitcoin and crypto in general, or is it one of those things where to you it's simply an asset class alongside your business, your real estate, et cetera? Like, how involved are you with, the day-to-day of what it's doing?
Yeah, I think of it as an asset class. I really look at it as like a stock, right? Like I'm buying Amazon or Facebook or whatever it is, right? Meta, I guess, whatever the hell Marx wants to call it now. But no, I look at it as an asset class. I have jumped on a handful of things that they want to be transactional cryptos.
That's what I was gonna say. Going on that, because like you're talking on the lending side of things, right? Like you've done a lot more than most people with the traditional. I'm just going to set my 10% in a rather volatile asset class. I mean, you've leveraged it. You've talked through some of that stuff. I think that's unique to people.
Yeah. I mean, you can lend it to people, right? And you can also borrow off of it, right? And because it's so volatile, you don't get you get maybe 70% of total value if you want to borrow off. But you can lend it and earn on the backside too. They call it staking. But I've also jumped in a few coins. I'm not a big altcoin guy. I think Bitcoin is Coca-Cola and Ethereum is Pepsi, right? I think they're brand names. And for the longest time, you watch CNBC and they would use Bitcoin and crypto interchangeably. They're not. There's people building awesome stuff. And, when crypto had a huge crash, obviously the FTX stuff and Sam Bankman-Fried or whatever, like those are actually good things for the crypto world, right? It gets the scammers out of the business. And it's such a libertarian idea, right? No government regulation, all this stuff. I've actually come around to this, that I think some regulation is good. And as we're seeing, like this week, we've seen ETF get approved. All these things of like institutional investors are now going to have exposure to cryptocurrency, and mostly Bitcoin. I think that's good for the crypto industry because now people can build dope shit,
legitimate,
and not have scammers in that world. And there's still always, the dollar's been around for a long time, guys. There's still fucking scammers, right? So there's going to be this stuff. But I think the two brand names aren't going anywhere. What was the question? Sorry, I was just rambling there.
It was just like how much.
I can't believe I just heard you say some regulation is good.
I know.
I'm thrown by that.
I know. I'm change your
You're
mind.
coming around. Right?
Yeah, it was more so like how involved you are with kind of the day-to-day. And it seems like from what you said, to sum it up, like you understand the bigger picture, and you have a long enough time horizon to where you can just kind of let it do its thing without stressing on the day-to-day basis about whether it's up or down.
I mean, I'm a buy and hold forever, right? I think with almost everything. There's a few moments in time where you can make some moves, but like, to me, so we don't accept cryptocurrency here at the bar. Still just a little too volatile for me to accept and pay employees and that kind of stuff. And at the end of the day, any of these places that accept cryptocurrency instantly change it into USD. Like that's just what they do, right? So they might accept it because it's kind of a cool, funky thing, and they get some Instagram likes. At the end of the day, they're still changing it into USD right away. But if we can make it transactional, so Luna, I don't know how deep we want to go into this, but Luna was a coin that was meant for transactional, right? Where it was backed by UST, and it's supposed to like kind of keep it not as volatile. And if it's not as, you can transact with it. I really liked it. That dude shit the pot too, right? So luckily I got most of my money out of Luna before it crashed, but it went from, I mean, it was 117 a coin to 14 cents in 36 hours.
Wow.
Right. So like that's kind of gnarly shit. Right. And yeah. I mean, you gotta be able to feel these swings and live with them if you're living in this crypto world.
Yep. Speaking of a loss, let's talk a little bit about, you reminded me actually before we started this that you did have a loss. I didn't think you had, but walk us through the 1L on the balance sheet.
Inglenook. Okay. So there was a bar. It's like a couple 3 blocks away from where I am now. It wasn't working and went up for sale. It was pretty cheap. I had tons of arrogance because everything I had touched has gone to gold up to that point. And so look at how smart I am, and look at my brand, and look at how important, hubris out the fucking ears. I was like, oh, I can just go over there, say it's cool, put a little lipstick on it, see you later. Didn't go that way. What was nice was, understanding how to sell these businesses and buy them are weird. Because if you don't own the real estate, what are you really selling? You're selling FF&E, right? Furniture, fixtures, and equipment. You're selling whatever the brand is, your blue sky that you've created, and your loyal customer base, right? And then there's like some assets in there, whatever, product. So I go in, do the remodel myself. Again, one of these things it took probably 2 months again, because I'm running 2 shops at that time. And I was frazzled and hired some people. Actually took one of my pieces from another shop over there to be a manager. And it just was slow growth. And it wasn't really losing money. It was just barely breaking even, right? I'm putting 25, 30 hours a week into this shop. End of the month, net income's $1,100 and I'm not getting paid out of there, right? It's like, I might as well fucking drive Uber, right? Like that's bad use of my time. And in parallel, I'm not around the other shops that somehow I can't put my finger on it, but they're sliding a little bit too, right? So like it was an interesting experience to go through. But then for Jess's, I think it was her 30th birthday, I bought us tickets to Cuba. It was right when Cuba had opened up. And so I go to Cuba for a week. There's absolutely no cell phone service there, anything like that. We land back in America after a week in Cuba, where we haven't seen a toilet seat in 7 days. And, and I mean, we stayed at nice hotels in Cuba. They're not fucking nice. So I'm coming back like a little haggard. And we land on the plane, and I open my phone, open the bank accounts. I'm like, okay, Tavern did this, other room did this. Inglenook hasn't done $1 in the whole week. My manager closed the shop while I was gone, hung a sign on the door, said, we're closed for business, fired all the employees.
Without your knowledge?
Correct.
Did this manager have any ownership in the business, or they're just the manager?
Just the manager. So I came back to triage. But I tell you what, Pokemon Go came out the week later, and I forever in my heart will have such a soft spot for Pokemon Go. Do you guys remember Pokemon Go?
Oh, yeah. Never understood it, but yeah.
2 like honey holes or whatever the fuck they're called in Tavern's courtyard. And it was like a Tuesday night where I'm just like, why are there so many people here looking at their phones? And then I figured out what it was. Pokemon Go had 2 lures and you could catch rare Pokemon in Tavern's Court. Like, after having like the biggest loss of my career, Pokemon Go was just like, hey, here's a $25,000 bump. Like, I mean, it was really nice. I don't know, the universe gave it to me, but coming out of like, oh shit, what do I do? And trying to scramble to like call the old employees and like, do I try and sell this or what, like whatever it was, like, yeah, I mean, it spun into like something. I was like, oh, I'm going to figure out Pokemon Go and drop lures and like attract more Pokemon. I mean, I don't know. I got into it. So that hurt, but it was a learnable moment and 100% on me, right? Like, you hire them, you train them, you put them in those positions. It's on you. The one thing I did that protected myself on that was I took over their lease. There was like 18 months left on their lease that like I knew at the end of those 18 months, I could either prove that it worked or prove that it didn't work. And so like I wasn't laid out for a 7-year lease that I was paying for, right? Like either we'll re-up or we'll just cancel the lease and sell the assets, right? And that's what we ended up doing.
What was that conversation like when you linked up with the manager? Like, I feel like we skipped a whole part there of like the justification of closing the doors, putting up the sign, firing everyone. Like, how does that happen in a week?
Yeah, we haven't really spoken since.
Okay. That's how that went down.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of those that like you can win the argument. What's it do for you?
Yeah.
Right. Like, so to me, that was kind of just like, all right, fuck you. You're dead to me forever. But like, what?
Yeah.
What am I going to do? Scream and yell at her and come back and like, yeah, I mean, like, okay, fuck it. That happened. Let's just focus on growth now. Right. Like, offense is so much more fun than defense to play. And, I keep learning that routinely. Okay, fuck, that happened. That sucks. Let's go figure out how to make some more money. Get it back.
Where do you get your insight from, or like who do you ideate with? Like, do you focus on working with mentors, consuming podcasts, reading books, all the above? Like, how are you working on yourself so that in turn you can work on the businesses?
Yeah, I'm really lucky, man. I'm surrounded by a bunch of smart minds. So my gambling buddy, we have a once a month phone call where we talk finances and like pro trends. Landon is somebody I lean on to. Obviously my father, just being a father now, understanding like, man, I care more about my son than I do about myself. And knowing that my dad feels that same way about me is such a weird feeling. Like, you don't feel it until you're a father. So I can run shit by him, and he's always on my team. Although he's a little more risk adverse than I am. Then the other side of this is podcasts, right? We talked before we got on call. I think Naval is a really smart mind. People villainize social media. Well, as long as you're liking the right stuff, your thread's going to be what you want it to be, right? My thread is Gary Vaynerchuk and it's Naval and it's people that are thinking smart, right? So, that stuff plants a seed and then you go do your own research on that shit, right? So, yeah, I mean, that's, I also am lucky to be really good friends with my accountant. I think accountants are a nice place to leverage because they get to see the insides of tons of businesses. And they know who's and losers, right? Again, we talk about the scoreboard. They know the scoreboard. So yeah, I call him the wise man, right? I got a lawyer, I got an accountant, and I got my dad. Those are the first places I start. Then I go into my gambling boys and my own research after that.
So yeah, Matt and I always have these conversations. I always say, obviously working for Matt on the investment side of things is like Matt's risk tolerance. If there's a top of the score, just blow it through it. Right. So I'm always like, Matt, I'm not those dollars, right? Those aren't the dollars that you're paying us to manage. Like, for him, it's almost like we've got to put a safety net around some of them, because with the rest, he's going to go and try and 10 to 100x those dollars. And he should, because it's worked out very well for him on that. But yeah, it's an interesting dynamic that we have. And I think that,
Hey,
the difference with Matt
for 1 second here.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go to the bathroom real quick.
Okay.
Yeah.
The difference with Matt is that he literally can just go, and every dollar is a tool, and it's got to be just go, go, go. So, yeah, I always say it's not those dollars, and we're not those dollars.
Yeah. I mean, it's cool to see how people kind of initially build their wealth and then how they kind of branch off from there, into, in the bio mentioned, real estate, obviously the two different, bars, crypto, and just kind of always trying to expand beyond. I think that's like a mark of a true entrepreneur, is someone who can take their nest egg that they built their initial wealth from and deploy that in other areas to further diversify, as opposed to trying to do 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 things at once. It's focus on one thing, make your money, and then, start branching out.
Yeah. And it's crazy how many, I would say Matt's kind of like a plate spinner in the circus, right? Like, it's how many plates this guy's got spinning all the time is insane. I mean, yeah, we talked about the bars, the crypto. He's also in the flower business. He's also in the real estate business. I mean, we're just scratching the surface, but it's always the itch with you, right, Matt? So it's like putting a moat around some of these dollars that if something goes chaotically wrong, that you just trade, there's
buckets, right? Putting in different buckets.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that is most fun for me, it hasn't made me the most money, but is super fun, is like moments to move. So when macro things happen, trying to second, third line think through it. So for example, like when crypto happened, or when COVID happened, like the first thing that made my eyebrows raise was when Macau closed down all their casinos. I was like, oh shit, this is real. Because there was kind of rumbles before that stuff, but then Macau closes and you're like, well, Jesus, these are the most greedy people on the fucking planet. This is bigger than Vegas, right? So like, okay, what's happening? Okay, we need masks. I was like, who makes all the masks? And they're like, Honeywell and 3M. I'm like, okay, buying those stocks. Like those kinds of things. Like, I hate that this shit happens, but like, if there's money to be made, like, bought Microsoft when ChatGPT started banging. Like, most recently, I'm shorting Hawaii Electric. I bought a bunch of it because I'm like, okay, they're a monopoly. They do 93% of the electricity in Hawaii. Day later, it's like, oh, you guys started all the fires? Sell all that, and I'm shorting the stock, right? Like when you can see what's happening in the world and like then make a couple bucks on it, fuck, I'll donate to a Hawaii fund once I make some money, but like I got to make some money first, right? So like, I don't know, moments that matter and thinking macro level stuff is so fun for me to think about. Bill Gates and Warren Buffett should not be creating money for their investors. They should be doing the actual job that we're going to have Trump and Biden again. Like, these fucking clowns. Like, it bothers me that the people that should be doing the job, it's the worst job on the planet, right? President of the United States. Yes, I think it's the worst job on the planet. How do we attract the right person to that job? I don't know what the answer is, but geez, I know Warren Buffett's a million years old, but like, he's a better option than both of these two, right? Like, how do we attract the right person to that job? Is something
it's such a dirty side of society. It's like, no matter who, I mean, listen, if you had all the money in the world, I don't know. I feel like I wouldn't want to be signed up to have every bit of my life going back as far as they could find come to the surface.
There's nothing but downside risk.
Yeah. Yep. It's the way that it's set up is just fucked up, and it promotes shameless types of folks that don't really have a business mind to go and play politics to feel important. And then I'm sure since you're into investing as well, Matt, you're aware of unusual whales and how all these politicians happen to get right in front of or get out of it at the right time, based on their policy decisions. Like, that's bullshit. You have a bunch of low level, small-minded sort of people in there getting rich. But the way it's set up, like, anyone that remotely respects himself wouldn't put their hat in the ring.
So here's, I think, I don't know if it was in the intro or it was in the pre-talk, but like, I'm such a capitalist, right? Like I love capital. I think small business done right is the greatest thing. People want to work for their money, man. And growing a business is like, geez, Taverns goes from 0 to 300,000 was way more fun than me trying to grind out 3 or 4 more points next year, right? Like, growth is so fucking fun, and it takes people out of poverty, and they're earning it. It's not hand away. But here's my one socialist view: is like, I don't know how we get the right person in the job, but geez, can you win capital? Like, I don't know. Do we cap it at a certain level to encourage them to go do what the greater good for the world is? I mean, again, Warren Buffett's the example. Is like, man, he understands macroeconomies. He doesn't buy a railroad. He buys 10% of the railroad industry, right? He just understands how shit works on a global scale. He should be running the world instead of Biden, who forgets what day it is, right? Like, I mean, it's just I don't know how we encourage that person to go do that job, because he has no incentivization to do it.
There's nothing but downside, and that's just crazy to me.
And how do we, and I don't want to short his downside. And I know, like, Elon's a good example, right? Elon's he's been rich forever, right?
Yep.
But he's bet his entire net worth like 4 or 5 different times. And if we cap him, he's not going to build Tesla. He's not going to build SpaceX like that. It doesn't exist. So I don't know. I battle with it, but man, I think if we can get brilliant minds into government somehow, and trust me, I don't fucking want to be in it. I just don't know. I don't know how to encourage the right people to go do that job.
Well, the challenge is too, and you had given me a recommendation, Naval, to listen to. Have you come across Andy Frisella and Real AF? So that's a really good podcast. I give almost all the credit to when I was living at my dad's at 27, 28 years old, driving for Uber, and, coming out of that and doing what I'm doing now, to what I learned through Andy's podcast. And one of the things that he shares is like, listen, it doesn't matter if it's Trump, it doesn't matter if it's Biden, it doesn't matter if it's this person, that person. Like, what needs to happen is there needs to be a cultural shift, which then will demand that the appropriate people go in office. But it's not the other way around. Like, one person, 2 people, they're not going to change it. So what he kind of arrives at as his thesis is that personal excellence is the ultimate rebellion, where if you're working out, you're eating clean, you're, striving for success, there's that multiplier effect where you impact. Like, think about the gentleman who was homeless that you brought in, gave a job, and became a part of each other's life. And now he's helping other people. Like, when you're personally excellent yourself, that becomes contagious, but it takes everyone individually. And then you drive the right people into office that can support that culture that was rebuilt. But right now, you're not going to have, doesn't matter who the talking head is, it's going to be difficult to shift culture where it's at right now.
And again, at the end of the day, it's like, the local elections are the elections that matter more. This is the stuff that affects my business and my team, and like that, like that's really where focus. I mean, Trump, Biden, whoever the fuck, like, that doesn't affect me that much, and I can't really affect it that much. Whereas I can call a city council member and they'll pick up the phone. Like those kinds of things do matter. So local elections too, right? I think is a big portion of where it starts.
100% agree. Well, before we wrap up, one of the questions that we ask all of our guests, if this is, your first time listening in, is our guests have had some level of meaningful success. And a lot of times it's has to do with their own personal drive and will to succeed. It has to do with the people around them. It has to do with the content they consume, and more specifically, the books that they read. So one of the things that we ask all of our guests is a book that's had an impact on them. That way we can start to distill a reading list for all of you listening. So Matt, there are 3 books that have had an impact on you. And I guess I'm not looking for necessarily a book report on each one, but just like a tidbit or two as to why it's had an impact on you. So the first one's Rich Dad, Poor Dad. The next one is How to Win Friends and Influence People. And then the other one is 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. So I'm curious, like, what were the 1 or 2 nuggets in each of those that has had an impact on you?
Well, let's start with I can barely read.
I listen to a lot of audiobooks, if that's what you're getting at.
Yeah, I just cleaned out the garage on a day off, and my mom kept everything. So I had these like CTBS scores, and I was 90 something in all the math and science. I was 18 in spelling, so 18th percentile. So I can barely fucking read. But again, I circle back to my dad being HR manager. So 7 Habits by Stephen Covey. We would listen to that in the car on cassette tape is how we used to do it.
No shit.
Yeah. But my dad, so we do business summits every year. Pops comes back, does a 3-hour thing with the team. But 7 Habits of Highly Effective People is always stuck in my mind. Cause he was brainwashing me from 8, 9, 10 years old probably is when we're listening to this stuff. Rich Dad, Poor Dad, I actually did read, and really just seeing how people think about money is interesting, right? And kind of the way we're brainwashed in the educational system sets us up to work for someone else. And I think the main thesis of that book is like, well, you're never going to get wealthy working for somebody else. You're trading your time for dollars, and you need to figure out how to scale your time. Landon, you're not down here as much anymore, Omaha, and like obviously not a drinker, but like, dude, I'm not here if we're open. I try not to be, right? I'm in at 8 o'clock in the morning and I work till 5, 6 or something like that. But a bunch of friends come back from college and come down and say, hey, where are you? Well, I'm not in the bar at midnight. I'm not in the bar at 11 p.m. Like, I'm sleeping actually. Now the kid goes, I wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning. And so I'm sleeping earlier. Meanwhile, my money's earning, right? So like I've set up people in the places to succeed and I've trained them. I always think of it as like, I'm kind of a coach and now it's game day. God, we did all our practices. We did all our stuff. Like, I did all I can. Now you guys roll. Everything's working. Everything's fixed. That was the main theme of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, was just thinking about how money works and how you use money. How do you scale your time? And then how to win friends and influence people. Well, I guess I should add another one. What's the, there's this FBI guy that talks about negotiations.
I know which one you're talking about.
Yeah, I'll think of the
I've
book
listened to it.
Just talking about how to quickly be liked, right? Because without being liked on the front end, there's a hard stop there. When you're trying to do business, it's important to set a relationship quickly. And so how do you do that? Well, you want to find common points with people. And we have way more in common than we don't, right? I think Fox News and MSNBC and everybody wants to say how different we are. Man, everyone's more in the center than on the edges. And if you can find the centers, right? One of the things I love about the bar business is you see all walks of life. You see rich, you see poor, you see up on their luck. You see down on your luck. You see the guy that invented the thing that makes Elmer's glue dry, and you see the person that just lost his job or his girlfriend was cheating on him, or whatever. Like, you see all walks of life, which is one of the things that made me fall in love with the industry. Is okay, let's find common ground. Obviously, for dudes, a lot of times that's sports. It's like, oh, you're cheering for North Carolina? Me too, right? And then you instantly just have some level of trust built. But yeah, Winning Friends and Influencing People is like a iconic book. Obviously, I mean, I think everyone should read it.
For sure. The FBI book, if I won't even say remembered it because I literally Googled FBI book about negotiations. Yeah. But then it reminded me it's Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. Yeah.
Also good, right? He talks about mirroring and like just the small stuff of like, oh, if they cross their legs, you should cross your legs. If you just repeat a few words back to them, they'll say it again in a different phrase. And like, that gives you more information. And like, those kinds of things are just weirdly valuable. In a day-to-day thing. And I don't think you're working the system. I think it's creating relationships and bonds.
Details matter.
Yeah, sure do. 1%, 2%, 3% compounded. It's a fucking big deal.
Amen, baby.
I really liked hearing about how 7, 8 years old, basically listening to an audio book on a cassette with your dad.
Yeah, I had no idea those existed back then. That's crazy.
I was telling my fiance, I was like, when we have kids, I hope you know that like I'm playing Think and Grow Rich and I'm just rattling off all of these books. I was like, I'm playing those in the background instead of like lullaby music. I want to get in their subconscious so they're ready to fucking go once they're of age. So I'm glad I'm not totally crazy thinking that.
At the end of the day, man, we are fucking brainwashing, right? And we can brainwash good or bad.
In a good or bad way. Yep.
So like, it's your choice.
Love it. Well, Matt, this has been awesome, man. And I know you and Landon obviously have known each other for a number of years, and we just met. But I hope that next time I go out to Nebraska, hang out with Landon, that we get to get together, come check out the bar, maybe right when you open at 5, so we can at least catch you on your walk out. But this was great, and I think there was a lot of good nuggets for folks listening in. So we really appreciate your time, man.
Appreciate
you, brother.
Thank you.
Be awesome. Good.
Well, for everyone listening, we appreciate your time and attention as always. If there's anyone like Matt or, like some of the other guests that we've had in the show so far, feel free to reach out to us. We'd be happy to see if the guest that you have in mind or yourself is a good fit. But until next time, we'll see you then. Mayweather with the defense. I don't care what a critic got to say. I got him picking up the